Hello and welcome to Hockey Talk. My name is Jaret Schnieder along with Matt Durnan. Matt, we've had a pretty busy week in the NHL. We know for one thing, Chicago's still undefeated. Some other teams are starting to climb up. Some teams are starting to drop down. Yeah, exactly. It seems to be the same. Well, not undefeated. I mean, they haven't lost in regulation yet. They've kept the streak going up to about 18 games now, so we'll see how that goes in the future. There's also some teams who are dropping off. There's teams like the Jets who are sitting around 500, so I mean, they're on the bubble. They could still make it if they put a little bit, if they put about a 5-6 game win streak together. I think they got a shot. But other than that, right now, a 500 record I don't think is going to get you in. But some new things in the NHL this week. We've got a couple of trades as well as some new conference possibilities coming up next year, moving to 4 different conferences. So I'll pass it over to you with the new possible alignment here coming up for maybe next year.
Well, the language of it is a little bit difficult to understand right now. They're calling it conferences, they're calling it divisions. Right now, we know for sure it'll still be the East and West Conference, and going down from what were 6 divisions is now going to be turned into 4. I guess they're going to call it divisions, conferences. But the East will be having 2 groups. We'll say groups for safety's sake.
But they are completely separate, right? Like it's going to be 4 individual things rather than like 2 divisions together. Like now, where you see like they're together on one conference. Now they're going to be like 4 different things, still under the name Eastern and Western Conference.
Yeah. Well, what we've got here is it's the East, and within the East there's the Central and the Atlantic. So Central is essentially looking like the former Northeast, so you're going to have Toronto, Boston, Montreal, Ottawa, and Buffalo. And then added to that will be Detroit and the 2 Florida teams, Tampa and the Panthers, will be added into that. And then the Atlantic will be mostly the same Atlantic with the Pittsburgh Rangers teams, but you're adding in now Columbus and Carolina Hurricanes are going to be joining that division as well. So you're kind of breaking up that weak division was the Southeast, which was formerly Carolina, which was always only sending 1 playoff team. So you kind of break that division up. They divide among the Central and Atlantic. And then the biggest move, the most noticeable, obviously, would be changing Detroit and Columbus coming over from the West and going to the East. And then going the other way, you've got Winnipeg, which needed to happen. This really needs to happen because they're in an unfair kind of spot with their scheduling being where they are, playing in in Central Canada, and they've got to be they're traveling all over the place with their schedule. So it's more fair to move them into the Central, where a lot of those Western teams are. So they're going to be looking at playing teams more like Minnesota, who's not a lot of travel for them. Chicago won't be too bad. Nashville, St. Louis, it's not so bad. So I do like that for the grouping for travel's sake. Competition looks good. You do have those local rivalries still. What really interests me is the playoff format. And you know a bit more about this than I do. I think you've read up a little bit more on it than I do. So as far as I know, it's 3 teams from each group and then 2 wild cards.
That's what you had mentioned before. Yeah, it's 3 teams from each group and a wild card. But what I understood is with the 4 conferences is that it's going to be played the first 2 rounds inside your own little mini 4-team or 8-team, 7-team conference now. So we're going to see 4 teams come out of it, 1 from each conference, whereas before the final 4 teams would be just 2 from each conference. Could be either division, could be any of the 2 divisions, where now we're going to get 1 winner from each conference, and then that's when the East and West come into play each other.
So you're guaranteed to see a team from your conference in the conference final, is what we're saying, rather than having a stacked division kind of knock each other off, and then it'd just be them seeing each other.
Whereas right now it looks like we have the Pacific, Midwest, Central, and Atlantic. Those names could even change too. Those aren't the 4 necessary names.
It's all kind of
we could see things like Norris and stuff, Campbell come back, right? Those are just for right now. And I mean, the other thing that interests me is over in the Eastern Conference, whereas it's 15 and 15. Now it's 8 and 8 in the East and 7 and 7 in the West, which kind of interests me because moving forward into the playoffs, obviously the 2 Western conferences right now only have 7 teams, whereas it's going to be 4 across the board that get in, so it'll be a little bit different as seeing only 3 get out, right? More of an advantage
because there's less teams. So it's 8 either way. It's 8 teams. So 8 out of 14 is obviously a better chance than 8 out of 16. I'm no math whiz, but that seems like your odds are a little bit more increased. For the seeding, what I see is, as you said, you play within your own conference. So I do like that. So, you're not going to have those necessary blowout games where you've got the 1 versus 8 where it's really rare that a 1 is going to blow out an 8. If you've got a more tightly contested conference or division, whatever we're calling it, if it's a Central, so as it stands right now, what the Central Division looks like is Boston, Buffalo, Detroit, Florida, Montreal, Ottawa, Tampa, Toronto. So realistically, up at the top half of that, I mean, those are all some pretty solid teams. You could see a lot more 4 seeds knocking off 1 seeds, where you're going to see a lot more tight playoff matchups, like you see with the 4 versus 5 and the 3 versus 6, as you would when you see the 1 versus 8 and the 2 versus 7, where oftentimes you can see a little bit of imbalance.
But then you look at the playoffs last year where you see the LA Kings come in as an 8 seed.
That's true.
Who knock off the 1, 2, and 3 on their way to the Cup final before knocking off the Devils, who ended up anyway being a 6. But I mean, you're right. You'll see 4 1-4 matchups, and then 4 2-3 matchups, whereas a 1-6, 2-7. So in that sense, you're right. There'll be a lot more upsets, I think, in the playoffs. You could see the 3 and 4 teams in each conference getting some more shots at getting in, obviously, and then playing the other team in their conference. So I mean, I think it might be a little bit of an easier route to get to the conference final. Obviously, you got to be the best team out of 8, whereas in the conference final before, you had to be top 2 out of 15. So it's a little bit different, but yeah.
Well, I think we're looking at it as far as from a fan's perspective. You want to see those upsets. You want to see those like tighter matchups rather than see a 1 seed sweep an 8 seed in 4 games, make it look easy, and then kind of sit around, and it's not really that exciting for the fans. But from an economic standpoint, and things like travel for the teams who are actually playing. I mean, you got teams like Detroit, who is coming over to the East now, where they should have always been.
Yeah.
Who, when you look at the old structure and the old format, Detroit oftentimes was a 1 seed and could be playing an 8 seed like Anaheim, for example, or Phoenix. And that's a lot of travel for them. If they're going through the first 2 rounds where they've got to go to Phoenix in the first round and then to LA or Anaheim in the second round or something like that, that's a lot of travel. Whereas now they're going to be looking at teams more in their region, more like a Boston or a Buffalo or a Montreal, teams that are a little bit, closer to them geographically, and it eases the travel. You don't have that disadvantage where, you've got one team come to the final from one conference who's logged 6,000-7,000 kilometers of travel, as opposed to a team who has had the fortune of playing teams
Vancouver and Boston, right?
Closer to their region, and hasn't had that time shift, a lot of time between games traveling. So it's going to definitely be a little bit better for that standpoint as far as teams go.
Yeah, you mentioned travel. Obviously, we talked about Winnipeg. I mean, not having to play in the Southeast anymore. But the team that it really interests me about is travel is actually Columbus. Because you see Columbus, who are in the Western Conference, now with the new divisions or the new conferences, they're not only are they in the Central Division or the Central Conference in the Eastern Conference, they're in the Atlantic. So they moved as far east as possible. So, I mean, it's a little bit different for them as playing in the Western Conference. Now they're playing in the conference as far east as possible, not even in the Central Division with Detroit, Buffalo, and Boston being in Ohio. They're now with Carolina, New Jersey, both New York teams, Pittsburgh. I mean, so with them way over there, I think it's a little bit different for them, obviously. Not having to play even in the Central
Columbus
anymore.
doesn't go to the playoffs, so I don't think they'll be too affected by
But, I mean, during the regular season, right?
The playoffs,
I mean, yeah, no,
the regular
you're right.
season, yeah, that definitely is different for them, but the playoffs is...
And scheduling. Scheduling is another thing for me, actually, because as you see with 4 new conferences, whereas before you would see, I think it was 6, you play each team in your division 6 times, the team in your conference, other teams in your conference 3 times, and then a one matchup against the other teams in the conference. Now it's going to be a little bit different. The teams within your conference will play 4 to 5 times, depending if you're a 7 or an 8, and it's kind of a little bit messed up with that right now, but it'll be 4 to 5 times the team in your conference, and then all the teams in the 3 other conferences are home and home. So you get that chance to see every other team in your own barn or in their barn. So, I mean, as a fan, sitting in Winnipeg, I mean, right now they're in the Eastern Conference, so like Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, they're only going to come once every 2 years. You get to see them every year now, at least, or once for sure. Only once in your own building.
And then you get those other rivalry matchups as well are still going to stick around. But I had mentioned when we started the season that I do like the setup of this schedule where you're only playing your own conference. You get those rivalry games, you get those conferences. But to the same effect, you can kind of get a little bit... It can get stale when, you've seen the same team 5, 6 times near you. There is the rivalry, but at the same point, it can get kind of stale where, you might want to see teams like... If you're in Montreal, Toronto, Pittsburgh, you want to see maybe the Sedins come over. You want to see the Oilers come over with their young team and like a good upstart team. You want to see those guys in your own building, get a chance to see them, whereas you might not have before. So now I do like that you can... that idea with the scheduling where you can see every team once at home and you travel and see them all once. It does bode well for the scheduling. It does bode well for the fans. So I would have to agree that is a good point. Yeah,
it helps out the schedule, I think, because I mean, sometimes you get matchups where like you'll be your Eastern road swing will be like the Southeast teams, and you get the Northeast teams at home if you're a team in the Western Conference. Whereas now a home and home, it makes it fair for everyone because you have to travel everywhere and everyone has to come to you. Whereas before, if you're going to the other parts of the other conferences, I mean, it's a little bit weird because some years you're here, some years you're here. Then it makes it unfair for other teams in your conference who maybe don't have to travel as far east or travel as far west. You don't have to make that big western swing or vice versa, right? It's a little bit easier. It's fair and balanced. It's similar. I know we had talked about it earlier before we were taping. It's kind of similar to the NFL where, every year the schedule
is as fair and balanced as it really can be. You know, one year you're traveling here, you play the other conference where you have 2 games in their buildings and 2 games in your own. So this is a lot more balanced, I think, than what it previously was. We'll see. There's still kinks to work out, but I think I do like where they're going with it.
Yeah, and there's a couple of new trades coming up, but we'll take a quick break. We'll be back with those. There are a couple of trades this past week, and we'll be right back. You're watching Hockey Talk right here on Shaw TV. Hello and welcome back to Hockey Talk. My name is Jaret Schnieder along with Matt Durnan. Matt, we've had a couple of trades this past week in the NHL, including a couple of players going back to some former teams, as well as one thing that really surprised me was actually a top team in the Eastern Conference making a deal, which is kind of surprises me a little bit. But anyway, I'll go to you with the specifics. I know the Canadiens were involved as well as the Stars.
Yeah, so the Canadiens traded Jaret Cole to the Dallas Stars in exchange for former player Michael Ryder and a 3rd-round pick. And the second deal was Simon Gagne going back to Philadelphia from LA. Simon Gagne, a cup winner last year with the Kings, going back to Philadelphia in exchange for a conditional pick. Now, the conditional pick is a little bit...
it's a little tricky, right?
It's a little tricky to get... If Philadelphia makes the playoffs, then LA gets a 3rd-round pick. If Philadelphia doesn't make the playoffs, then LA gets a 4th-round pick. So it's kind of LA's hoping for this trade to work out and Gagne to be a success.
Because if they make the playoffs, the pick's a little bit higher in the round. So it's a little bit later.
It'll
be a later 3rd-round pick.
Out, you know, then Philly needs to help them out in the opposite direction. It's kind of, you know, scratch my back, I scratch yours kind of thing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so Ryder, you know, 30 goal scorer in the NHL with a couple of teams.
A couple of years, yeah.
Was pretty consistent in Montreal. He played under Claude Julien, I believe, and then he left when Julien left to Boston and played with him for a year, and then played a couple more years with Boston and before departing to Dallas. Had some good years with Dallas, or a good year last year with Dallas, had a good year with Montreal. Never extremely consistent, but he has proven that he can score 30 in the NHL. I think it's a good move for Montreal. And Jaret Cole, from what I understand, kind of wanted out of Montreal. He wasn't really that happy with his role. So, and
he's kind of taking a backseat role in Montreal.
And it's a good cap move as well. It frees up cap space. Ryder is an unrestricted free agent next year, so Montreal can kind of do what they want with him, and they can, if they want to re-sign him, they can. If not, then they're not under any obligation to pay him for the following year. So it does free up cap space that Cole was taking. Gagne, I don't mind. He had some great years. I think he scored 47. Was his best year in 2005, 2006 with Philadelphia.
Going back there.
I think he was a Canadian Olympian that year as well. Solid player. Philadelphia has had a little bit of trouble finding the net, especially with Hartnell out. He is back now, but Jakub Voracek is leading that team in scoring. So, I mean, they're looking for anybody at this point, I think, to kind of help them out with some scoring. They've been doing a little better lately, kind of on the cusp. I think they're sitting around like 10th, 11th in the East. They've played more games than almost anybody, and then just dropped a game recently to some team from Toronto. But besides the point, I don't know. What do you think about the deals?
I mean, if we go back to the first one, we'll go back to the Montreal Dallas deal. I mean, I'm not a GM of the Dallas Stars or anything, but I don't know why they would make that deal. Obviously, I mean, maybe to shake things up a little bit because Dallas, they've kind of slid a bit. I mean, they're still kind of in the thick of things, but I mean, as far as the Dallas Stars go, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to really pick anything out of it, but I mean, I don't know why they would make this trade. I mean, it definitely helps out Montreal. I mean, it's a phenomenal deal for the Habs because first of all, they're losing a guy who doesn't even really do anything there. Like, I mean, they're giving him back to Dallas for Ryder, who, I mean, like you said, he's a decent scorer. He had a couple of good years. I mean,
some good stuff.
He's a little bit older. He's a little bit older than Cole, so I mean, I get that. I mean, obviously, he's a little bit cheaper too, so it helps them out that way. And they get a pick out of it. They get another third-round pick. I mean, third-round picks, sometimes they're a loose cannon. Sometimes you can get good players. Sometimes, you know, they're wasteful. But, I mean, for Montreal, this is a great trade for them, especially, I mean, being a #1 team in the Eastern Conference, right up there, like leading the division 1, 2, 3, 4, right up in the conference. I mean, I think it's a great trade for Montreal, getting Michael Ryder, who's going to fit right in. I believe he's going to be playing tonight against Toronto. So as far as that goes, I think it's a great trade for Montreal. Dallas, yeah, maybe they wanted to trade things up. Maybe obviously Ryder wasn't having a very good year there.
I think he had about
things like that.
I think he had about 10 or 11 points.
Yeah, they're youngering themselves a bit too, right?
Yeah, where Cole's getting a little bit younger.
I mean, Cole will fit in maybe where Ryder didn't fit in with Dallas. So I mean, it's a little bit of trade like
he's a little bit of a different style player. I mean, Ryder's a little bit more of like a guy in a muck and grind, go to the net kind of guy. Cole's more of a speed, power forward kind of guy. So it's a different style player. I mean, he might fit in better with a guy like Jamie Benn, another kind of big, strong guy, whereas Ryder's style might not have complemented him. As I'd mentioned, Cole kind of might have wanted out of Montreal. As far as Ryder wanting out of Dallas, who knows? It might have just been what was available to Montreal at the time. That's what they were kind of looking to do, take anyone they can get at that point if Cole really wants out. What this kind of says to me, though, is I mentioned, I guess, on a couple episodes before, it was that this looks like a move that Montreal is kind of, rather than in a rebuild, they're more of in a let's win now.
Let's go get it right now,
like they're doing a lot, but I don't think anyone really expected them to be where they are right at this point in the season. We're sitting at the top of the conference, sitting at the top of the division. They do have a few more games played than Boston, who realistically will probably catch them. But I don't think anyone expected Montreal to be sitting right here where they are right now. So I think this is kind of a move of, you know what, maybe we've got something here. Let's get that extra pick. Let's get a guy who can maybe get us into a playoff push this year, see where we can go. As far as, like you said, Dallas maybe looking to get younger. Maybe, I don't know why they would trade a pick if they're looking to get younger.
Yeah.
It's a little bit strange. They're not really hurting. Dallas has kind of been, they had a decent start, kind of been up and down, kind of a mid-range team for me as far as the Western Conference goes. But I like you said, I think Montreal wins out on that deal. As far as the Philly-LA deal, hard to really determine a winner. If Gagne hasn't have a single goal yet this year, so whether he's going to really be a serviceable player, maybe a change of scenery, going back to a place where he did have some good success is going to change him up. Maybe that'll get him kickstarted again. Who can really say? And as far as a conditional pick, you can never know, especially with the fact that conditional tag is on it. You don't know what LA is going to end up getting, but they're picking it up. They're on like a 4 or 5 game win streak now. So they've been picking it up and doing it without Gagne scoring. So I think it's at the point where they can kind of say, you know what, if we slide and fall back below a playoff spot, at least we've got that conditional pick. We got an extra pick coming in the future. Maybe looking towards the future rather than trying to cement and say this is our year. They won their cup last year, so maybe kind of in like a little bit of a transition phase. It's hard to say. I mean, getting away from trades for a second. Sorry to just jump on here. As far as transition phases go. A lot of teams might be making some moves quickly with a lot of injuries going on in the NHL. I mean, we've got a lot of guys have gone down, a lot of big name guys, especially goaltenders. I mean, you got Brodeur who just went down, Kari Lehtinen just came back from injury, Craig Anderson just went down with an injury, James Reimer in Toronto with an injury. Most recently, Ryan Kesler. So what do you think about these injuries? Is it a matter of no training camp? These guys weren't in shape, or is it just kind of unfortunate? Or
yeah, so jumping on the injuries now, I mean, it might have something to do with training camp. Obviously, with the short training camp, only a week. Like you mentioned, I think it was 4 goaltenders you had said they're all down, 4 starting goaltenders that are down. So, I mean,
I believe there's even more than that. I might not. Yeah, I just named a few. I think there's a few more even.
I mean, yeah, it's something. Mike Smith was down for a while too, wasn't he, in Phoenix?
He might have been.
I think he was out for a little bit too, but I mean, I don't know. It's tough to say when it comes to goaltenders.
Oh, no, it was Corey Crawford in Chicago who's hurt and just came back recently too, yeah.
So, I mean, it could have something to do with the training camp. I mean, we're already 20 games into the year. Well, not 20 games. I shouldn't say, about 15 games into the year.
Most teams are getting up around 20. It's 18,
they're up between 20?
now.
Okay.
It's up between 18 and 19 now.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I don't know. It's tough to say, really. There are a decent amount of games in. If guys are getting hurt now, I mean, some of them, like Anderson, who's been out for 4 or 5 games to this point. Some of them have been out for 4 or 5. So, it could have something to do with the short training camp. It's really tough to say. I mean, some of them are just unfortunate incidents. I mean, you look at some of the players like Carlson. I mean, that's an unfortunate injury. I mean, just gets stepped on. There's a couple injuries like that. I mean, Landeskog took an elbow to the head. Mm-hmm. He's back now, but he was out about 3rd, 4th game of the year, so he's back now. So it's good to see him back, helping out the Avalanche. But I mean, I don't know. His was more of an unfortunate injury too. So I don't know. As far as injuries go, it's tough to say at this point. It could be either way, I think.
Well, I'm more on the side of, as far as the goalies go, that it is a lot to do with a lack of training camp.
They take a little bit more than skaters do they not?
Yeah. And they work. They're working 60 minutes a game. They're not coming off, taking shifts off. They're on the entire game.
Especially in the short season, playing more games too, right?
They're kind of on a little bit more of a heavier workload. It's kind of give and take, because you look at guys like John Quick, who hasn't been hurt, and he's played nearly every game in LA. Henrik Lundqvist has played nearly every game in New York, and he's not hurt. But you do have guys like James Reimer in Toronto, who went down with what seemed like a pretty harmless play. He just stretched for a puck, strained his knee. Same thing happened to Craig Anderson. It looked like a pretty harmless play where he was stretching to make a save, tweaked an ankle.
So there you go. That comes from training camp.
That's something that just could have to do with, it's a little too much strain on the body. They're not quite warmed up. They're not worked in. They're overworked and their muscles aren't ready. So I think that is kind of having an effect on it. And as I think we had mentioned, what was it, the first episode we did, is that there's going to be you thought, I didn't think at all, but you thought that there would be a lot more pressure on the backups this year to kind of step in because the schedule is so condensed. And now you're looking at these guys who are going down with injuries. I think the backup goalies now are going to have to step up even more.
Yeah,
you look at teams like Chicago who haven't missed a step with Crawford going down, and Emery's been able to step in, do his job. Ben Bishop played great the other night against Montreal, made I think 40 saves and got them a shootout win. So those backup goalies are really starting to prove their worth. With the injuries, I think the backup goalies are actually, and even you can look as, I hate to be a homer, but Toronto, Ben Scrivens has stepped in. He had back-to-back shutouts. He's played incredibly well as a backup. So got to give you kudos on that one, that the backup goalies have really shown their worth and have really proved to be a valuable asset this year.
Yeah, and a bit of a different role than I thought they would be. I thought it would come in as with the condensed schedule. The backups have came in for injury. So I was a bit wrong, but I mean, the backups did come into play, or are coming into play now in most cases. So we'll see that. But as far as picks go, I mean, we both had, I had under 500, you had under 500. So not the best weeks for us, but we'll regroup those when we come right back. You're watching Hockey Talk right here on Shaw TV. Welcome back to Hockey Talk. My name is Jaret Schnieder along with Matt Durnan. Matt, we've done picks every week so far. Overall record still looking all right, but last week it didn't go so well for us.
No, I was getting a little bit on my high horse after 2 straight winning weeks. Got above the 500 mark after that really terrible start. I went 1-6 last week. I'm ashamed of myself, and I'm back down to 19-20, just below 500. You went 3-4, a little better than me. You're at 22-17. So combined, we're above 500. You're doing a little better than I am, but overall, fairly average. Games this week, we're going to look at Wednesday. That's tonight. Rematch of that slaughter that Toronto put on Montreal. It's in Toronto now. Toronto embarrassed the Habs on their building. Tonight's in the ACC. What do you got?
So I know it's tough. They've played twice already this year, and Toronto's won both, I believe. Is that right?
That's true.
So I mean, tonight's game is where? It's in ACC. It's on the ACC. So I don't know. Montreal, top team in the league. They've already lost to Toronto twice this year, or not top team in the league. Sorry, one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. So really, they're due for a win against Toronto. But on that note, with Scrivens playing so well, I know he's in net tonight. I've got to take Toronto. I just can't. I mean, Toronto, they've won a couple of games, and usually they're due for a loss after a couple of wins. They usually can't string too much together. But on that note, I mean, you've seen Kadri's played phenomenal all year. He's played solid. Like, he hasn't had too much of a slouch. Kessel's back in it now. He sniped a couple of goals a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago, and now he's back on it. So back on the D. I got to take Toronto tonight at home.
All right, I'm trying to write your pick down. I don't know if the camera can see it. It's a Jets
pen. It's a Jets fan.
It's a nice pen, but it doesn't work for 60 minutes.
Woo, zing.
I got Montreal. I hate to do it. I'm a big Leafs fan. It's on my hat. I love the Leafs. But just as a fan who's seen this series for so many years, I know that historically, no matter how good, how bad the teams are, the games are always close, and the series always seems to wash out. 2 straight wins by the Leafs. I don't see them taking that third one. I think it'll be tight. I don't think it's going to be a blowout I don't think it'll be a blowout on either front. But Montreal's really buckled down since that 6-0 game against Toronto, and they've really played a lot tighter defensively, and I think they're going to kind of buckle down tonight. I can see a 2-1 maybe. I think Price might steal it, but I can see a 2-1 win for Montreal.
All right, so Montreal, that's tonight, and then tomorrow's Thursday. What do we got tomorrow?
Thursday, we're sticking with the Northeast Division again. Ottawa, Boston. Ottawa, despite all their injuries, still winning games on a 5-game win streak. Boston, arguably the best team in the Northeast. It's in Boston.
I got to go with Boston on this one. Just going to go with a gut feeling. Like you mentioned, Ottawa's on 5 straight. It's in Boston, you said? So yep. I just got to go with the Bruins. I mean, they're 12-2-2 this year. I got to go with the gut. I got Tuukka Rask at home, maybe stealing one tomorrow night.
Okay, I'm going to stick with Boston as well. I think, especially with Ottawa having 5 straight and all the injuries, they're due to crash and burn at some point. And I think this is the game that Boston kind of gives them a little bit of a wake-up call. I can see it getting kind of ugly, maybe 4 or 5-0.
And then that's Thursday. What do we got for Friday?
We got Minnesota, Anaheim. Anaheim, surprisingly, one of the top teams in the West this year. Minnesota, high-paid team. Everyone thought was going to be high-flying. Little comeback win last night.
They're all right, though. They've been
still
kind of floating around.
They've been steady, and they're a team that can match up. They're physical, they're fast, and I think they can match up pretty well against Anaheim.
I got to go with Anaheim tomorrow, or Friday rather, at home in the Pacific Division. I mean, they got Fast. Victor Fast. Is that how you say his last name?
Victor or something or other.
Victor Fast or Faf. I don't know. Maybe somebody can correct us on that. I'm not 100% sure. I know how to spell it though. But I gotta go. I think he'll be playing. I mean, Hiller's been hurt, so I'm gonna take Anaheim.
Hiller's another injury that we were talking about.
Hiller's another injury. There you go. So another starting goaltender. But I'm gonna take Anaheim.
Okay, I've had zero success picking against you, but I'm going to do it anyways because I'm not that smart. I'm going to take Minnesota because I like what I saw. I like what I saw from them last night. Parise really picked it up last night and he's looking to do some leadership. And I think Danny Heaton's going to drop a big clap bomb. Big bomb Gino.
From the high slot?
From the high slot, obviously, because that's the only place he snipes Genos from. So I got a good feeling about Heater. I think he's going to pop 2 on Victor Fost, and then he's going to have a big celly after the second one.
All right. So then what do we got for Saturday? Hockey Night in Canada?
Saturday, interesting one. I like this. I like when these teams play for some reason. I really like the West Coast teams. LA versus Vancouver. That's a good Kessler matchup, just went down for Vancouver. That's a huge loss for them. Bobby Lou got lit up last week against Detroit when I picked Vancouver to win. They got smoked.
Could be Schnieder and net. I mean, Schnieder didn't have a very good game last night, but that's I believe is their next game. They don't play until Saturday, so it's really weird. Someone had mentioned that to me yesterday that they don't play. They played last night. Don't play until Saturday.
Yeah.
They got a layoff, but I think it'll be Schneider.
They lost last night to Phoenix.
Yeah, but with Schneider and net giving up 4 or 5 goals or whatever, I think he's going to be. I don't know. I just have a feeling he's going to be in net again. I mean, after Long gives up 8, he's got to sit a couple out. So I think Schneider's going to be in net. But I'm going to take LA. I'm going to take LA on. I believe that's the late game on Hockey Night in Canada Saturday.
That is, yeah.
It probably is. So
I think that's the first time in Hockey Night in Canada we've actually taken a Canadian team.
I think you're right too. So anyway, I'm going to go with the Kings.
Okay. I'm going to stick with you in that. I think the LA, they've been rolling. I think they're on about 4 or 5 straight wins. They just beat Anaheim, who's arguably one of the best teams, one of the hottest teams, I mean, other than Chicago, in not only the Western Conference, but the NHL. I think Anaheim is rolling at about 13 or 12, 2-1 at the point that when they lost Chicago, I think is their only loss, if I'm not mistaken. I could be way off the board here. But LA to beat them is pretty impressive, and they beat them in pretty impressive fashion out of 5-2, I believe it was.
Yeah,
4-2 with an empty netter, but they beat them pretty soundly. So I think the LA they're rolling. They're starting to find their stride a little bit now. Maybe getting rid of some of that dead weight in Gagne. I think that this is going to be a win for LA.
And then Sunday, what do we got for Sunday?
We'll move on to Sunday. Another good matchup that I like. Another Original 6 matchup. We got Chicago. Undefeated at this point in time. Who knows what happens up until then?
Undefeated in regulation, yeah.
Undefeated in regulation, sorry, up to at the time of recording. Playing against Detroit, who could very well be the team to end that.
The knockoff game.
So, and it's in Detroit. That's at the Joe Louis Arena. So,
that's a tough one. I mean, it's always hard to pick against Chicago, but I'm going to go with Detroit at home. Joe Louis Sunday. It's probably Sunday afternoon. Could be a game on NBC. Could watch at home. I got to go with Detroit. I mean, I don't know. It could be an overtime win, so I mean, they could still keep the streak going. Chicago could be done by then, but either way, I'm thinking Detroit on a Sunday afternoon. It's tough. Obviously, that's one of the toughest picks of the week, I think. And I got to go with Detroit. I mean, they're rolling decently. I mean, they blew up Vancouver the other night. Zetterberg's playing phenomenal. Really stepped up as the new captain. I got to go with Detroit.
That was going to be my pick as well. I like Detroit just because last week on the afternoon game they blew up Vancouver. So it seems that Detroit seems to know what they're doing on Sunday afternoon games. Absolutely annihilated Vancouver 8-3.
They seem to play every Sunday afternoon too.
Chicago's a great team. There's no denying that they're the best team in the NHL, but every team's got to have one off game or at least, kind of fall off the track a little bit. And sooner or later they're going to lose. So I'm going to have to say that it's Detroit in this one.
And then Sunday we got 2 games left this
Monday.
week.
That's Monday. That was Sunday. Monday is
now Monday.
2 best players in the NHL facing off. Guys who are leading the league in scoring. Got Crosby against Stamkos, Pittsburgh against Tampa. It's in Pittsburgh on Monday.
In Pittsburgh, Tampa, Pittsburgh. Go with Pittsburgh. Just on the fact that Tampa's defense, the goaltending, well, maybe not so much defense, but their goaltending hasn't been very good. I mean,
pretty shoddy.
I've had Lynn back in a couple of drafts, and he's let me down, giving up 4. I mean, he's won a couple of games where he gives up 5 goals, which surprises me, but I had to go with Pittsburgh. I mean, Pittsburgh, they just about climbed back against Florida the other night. Pittsburgh, they're just too high-powered of a team. Tampa, they've been all right, but I just can't go against Crosby in that one anyway. I mean, it's a little bit far in advance, but I just got to take the better team, and I got to go with Pittsburgh.
Okay, I'm going against you in that one. Malkin has now been listed on the IR. He's injured for them, so that's a lot of depth that's hurting them. And from what I've seen from Pittsburgh, they just cannot keep the puck out of the net. I could put a lot of the fault on Vokun. He was brutal last night against Florida. He was brutal against Philadelphia as well in that 6-5 loss. But you can't completely fault the goalie. Pittsburgh's got to play some defense. And the fact that they've given up so many goals, especially to a team like Florida who isn't known for really lighting up the score sheet, to get lit up that bad against a team like Florida is kind of embarrassing. With the firepower that Tampa has, I think that Pittsburgh's going to need to pop 5 if they're going to want to win this one because I don't really see them shutting it down. So I'm going to go with Tampa in that one.
It's going to be a 6-5 hockey game or something like that.
Which has been a lot of what Pittsburgh's games have been this year. They're in a shootout. They don't lock anybody down.
And then Game 7, last one before we wrap this thing up.
We're going to go with a great rivalry game, another great Eastern Conference game, Philadelphia visiting the New York Rangers.
Philadelphia and the Rangers. Both teams have kind of struggled. I mean, the Rangers lost to the Jets the other night, which is good to see the Jets win in Madison Square Garden. I believe that was last night. So, I mean, it's a little bit further down the road. It's a whole week away, but I'm going to go with Philly in this one. I mean, they picked up Simone Gagne. Who knows if they start to turn it around a bit. I mean, they're kind of floating around. They're sitting like 10th right now, but I just got to go on a gut. I just got to go with Philly over the Rangers.
Well, I went last week. I said Rangers. This is my third time picking them, and they've let me down every time. They let me down again. Do I go with the law of averages? Does New York eventually win when I pick them?
I mean, you flip a coin how many times?
The more I watch the Rangers play, the more I don't like their game. They're boring. They seem slow. They seem slow, and Lundqvist does not seem himself this year. He's not stealing them those games that he was. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe they weren't as good as we thought they were. And a lot of it was Lundqvist kind of stealing games for them. All that said, I got to stick with you and go with Philly. And knowing my luck, the Rangers will win. So we've got our pick set. I think I've got one different than you, two different than you, three different than you.
So
I've got a chance to catch you or fall really far behind. So we'll see how it goes.
Or keep it even. I mean, we'll have a good week, I guess, as far as picks go. I'm a little bit ahead of you, like you mentioned. As far as we've got conferences that happened this week, got a couple of trades, so we'll see what shakes down this week. I'll be back next week. My name is Jaret Schnieder, along with Matt Durnan. You're watching Hockey Talk right here on Thompson, Flin Flon, and the Paw on Shaw TV.